In the summer of 1971, a red, white, and blue race car pulled onto the starting grid at Donnybrook Raceway in Minnesota. And what happened over the next 2 hours would be one of the most stunning upsets in American motorsport history. Because that car wasn't a Mustang, it wasn't a Camaro, it wasn't a Firebird, it was an AMC Javelin, built by a scrappy little company in Kenosha, Wisconsin that everyone in Detroit had already written off as dead, and driven by a man named Mark Donohue who proceeded to torch every single Big Three rival into the asphalt and win 7 of 12 races that season to claim the Trans Am Championship outright. Which means that in 1971, the best pony car in America wasn't made by Ford, it wasn't made by General Motors, it was made by a company you probably cannot even name today. And that right there is the tragedy at the heart of everything we're about to talk about. Because the Javelin didn't just lose the market, it was actively erased from the American memory, abandoned by the very country whose roads it dominated. And today, fewer people have heard of it than can name the last 3 Formula One world champions. Yet, if things had gone even slightly differently, if one single decision in 1974 had been made differently, the Javelin might be sitting in the cultural pantheon right next to the Mustang and the Camaro. And every single one of you watching would already know exactly what it was. The AMC Javelin was born in 1968 out of desperation. Because American Motors Corporation, formed from the merger of Hudson and Nash in 1954 and once bold enough to call itself the nation's 4th largest automaker, had watched the Ford Mustang eat the entire pony car market alive since 1964 and knew that if it didn't answer, it would die. So a designer named Dick Teague, a man who had walked away from Chrysler because he believed he could do something more interesting, drew a long, lean, aggressive 2-door hardtop that debuted with a price tag under $3,000, sold 55 zero units in its very first year, outsold the Plymouth Barracuda straight out of the gate, and finished 3rd in the Trans Am Series in 1968 before anyone had even had time to properly learn its name. And yet, despite all of that, despite the racing wins and the design awards and the legitimate performance credentials that had been proven at track after track across America, most of you have never seen one on the road, never watched one at a car show, never heard a commentator mention it in the same breath as the pony car legends it beat. And the question isn't whether the Javelin deserved better, because it clearly did. The question is what actually killed it, because the easy answer, the oil crisis, the emissions regulations, the dying muscle car era, is true, but it is not the whole truth. And the part of the truth that nobody tells you is far more brutal and far more interesting than a barrel of crude oil ever could be. By 1971, AMC had done something that no small, resource-starved independent automaker should have been able to do. They had partnered with Roger Penske, the same Roger Penske who would go on to win 20 Indianapolis 500 races. And together, Penske and Donohue rewrote what the Javelin was capable of, installing a dry sump lubrication system that solved the engine oil starvation problems that had plagued the car in 1970, unlocking a 401 cubic inch V8, producing 330 gross horsepower that turned the Javelin into something the Mustang genuinely feared, and then winning back-to-back Trans Am Manufacturers' Championships in 1971 and 1972, while Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge, Plymouth, and Pontiac had all quietly pulled their factory racing support from the series because they couldn't keep up, which means that by 1972, the AMC Javelin was not just winning races, it was winning races against cars that no longer had the courage to show up. And yet even that victory, even the humiliation of every Big Three rival on the track, could not save it, because while the Javelin was winning championships on the weekend, its parent company was hemorrhaging money on the weekdays, spending resources it didn't have trying to compete across every market segment against companies 10 times its size with 10 times its budget. And the accounting ledger in Kenosha was writing a story that no amount of racing glory could overwrite. Then, in 1972, something strange happened. AMC got desperate in an interesting way, and instead of cutting the Javelin, they decided to make it glamorous, bringing in French fashion designer Pierre Cardin, the same man who had revolutionized Parisian haute couture in the 1950s, to design an interior package that featured 6 multicolored pleated stripes in Chinese red, silver, plum, and white on a black background running from the front seats, up the door panels, across the headliner, and down to the rear seats. A package that cost buyers exactly $84.95, that only 152 people ever ordered, and that was so visually unlike anything the Mustang or the Camaro was offering that it should have been a cultural moment. Pierre Cardin, the man who put fashion on the moon, putting his name on a muscle car interior, and for a brief window in 1972 and 1973, the Javelin was genuinely cool in a way that defied every category the automotive press had invented. A race champion with a fashion designer's fingerprints on its seats, and yet it still wasn't enough, because AMC's leadership had already made the decision that would kill the Javelin before most buyers had even seen the Cardin interior on the showroom floor. The decision was the AMC Pacer, a wide, round, bubble-shaped economy car that AMC's executives were convinced would be the automobile of the future. The answer to the oil crisis, the car that would finally rescue the company from its perpetual underdog position against GM and Ford, and to fund the Pacer's development and to free up production capacity at the Kenosha factory. AMC killed the Javelin. Killed it not because it was failing, because in 1974, the Javelin actually outsold the Plymouth Barracuda and the Dodge Challenger in their own final year. Killed it not because buyers didn't want it, because 536 people bought one in the last model year alone, but killed it because AMC needed to bet everything on a car that looked like a fishbowl on wheels, and would itself be discontinued by 1980 after never achieving the sales numbers that justified sacrificing the Javelin to build it. And so, on the last day of production in November 1974, a car that had beaten every pony car in America on the racetrack, that had employed one of the greatest racing drivers who ever lived, that had been touched by one of the greatest fashion designers who ever lived, rolled off the assembly line in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and was never replaced, never revived, never eulogized properly, just quietly erased from the American automotive conversation, while the Mustang continued on to become an icon, and the Camaro became a legend, and the Javelin became a trivia question that most car enthusiasts still get wrong. And here is the part that should genuinely make you angry. The AMC Javelin continued winning races after it was killed. The Trans Am Series awarded it a third championship title in 1976 under a new classification system, meaning that the best version of the Javelin on the racetrack was a car that no longer existed in any AMC showroom, no longer available for purchase, no longer being manufactured, already gone, and yet still fast enough to beat everything that replaced it. And today, a numbers-matching 1971 Javelin AMX in excellent condition sells for 30 to 50% less than a comparable Mustang or Camaro from the same year. Which is not because it's a worse car, every performance metric says otherwise, but because America forgot it, because AMC's marketing budget was a fraction of Ford's and a fraction of GM's, because nobody made a movie where Steve McQueen drove one through the streets of San Francisco, because the company that built it was sold to Chrysler in 1987, and the name was buried so deep that even the people who bought AMC's assets didn't bother to resurrect a single model. And because history, as it turns out, is not always written by the fastest car on the track, it is written by the company with the deepest pockets and the longest memory.